Welcome back to my YouTube channel, my loves. If this is your first time tuning into one of my videos and you don't yet know who I am, my name is Stef and I'm the Psychic Soul Alignment Coach. What that means is that I work with spiritual people and spiritual entrepreneurs to help them to do very deep levels of healing, also known as inner work or shadow work, in order to peel back all the layers of limiting beliefs, fears, traumas, insecurities that they may have that are keeping them from being more of who they truly are in life and creating the success that they desire. So as we do this deep inner work and we peel away all those layers and stuff, more of their true self can emerge on this higher self level, on this soul level, and they're able to much more easily navigate life and create success in all areas. So that is how I help people. Here on my YouTube channel, I typically do videos on the subjects of mindset, manifesting, healing, spirituality, spiritual entrepreneurship, but I also do videos on spiritual activism. I bring forward channel messages. I just do whatever I feel called to do in that time or I'm asked to do by my spirit guides. So if these are topics that interest you, I definitely suggest that you hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification button, and change your settings to all, because I don't have a consistent upload schedule at the moment. And that way, by changing your settings to all, you always get notified of when I do upload a video here on my channel. Now, if you have not yet been able to take part in my healing workshop that I did here on YouTube, and you would like to be supported with your healing work and to know what it really takes to start doing deep levels of effective healing work, then I definitely suggest that you go to the cards section here in the corner of this video and go check out the video where I announced my healing workshop, and in the comments of that video is where you can click on the link to sign up to receive these video teachings and the PDFs that accompany them so that you can do this deeper healing work for yourself and you can get started on this journey of self-empowerment. And on that video as well, I mentioned this other free mini healing program that I'm offering that you can also take part in. So definitely go check out those offers and see how they speak to you and how they support you on your journey. And I really just hope that they make such a massive difference. Now, as I said a moment ago, sometimes I bring forward messages around spiritual activism or just things that I feel called to speak on. And this video is going to touch a little bit on spiritual activism, although I do have a video coming up soon on that subject as well, on, spiritual bypassing that I'm noticing happening in the spiritual community and just sharing my thoughts and perspectives on that. But if you want to go ahead and start hearing my experiences and perspectives on spiritual bypassing that's going on in the spiritual community, I highly suggest that you go to the cards to click on that playlist where I talk about spiritual activism versus spiritual bypassing that you can check out if that's something that speaks to you, okay? So today's video is all around spiritual teachers and knowing who the right or the aligned spiritual teacher for you is, okay? So this is a topic that I have been feeling called to speak out about the last year, but it's increasing, as time has gone on, and I've seen certain things, and I just feel really called to speak on this subject, okay? I don't know how long this video is going to be. Typically, my videos are 20 to 30 minutes long, sometimes an hour long, depending on what I'm doing, so you can always go to the settings option here on this video, increase the speed so that it suits you and, respects your time, okay? So, how do you know who the right spiritual teacher for you is, okay? First and foremost, I want everyone to know that I'm really doing my best to speak with love today, and it's never my intention to call out anyone. That is not something that I believe in calling out people. I think it's important to create awareness around behaviors or things that are maybe not of the highest good or even toxic, but I don't necessarily believe in calling out culture. That's just not me. And so my intention for this video is really to raise awareness around the importance of being more mindful of who we follow for our spiritual guidance and development and to assist us with our spiritual journey. Okay, and that's really what I want to speak on today, and I really hope that it truly serves you. And I'm going to be speaking a lot from my own experience as well, and just things that I've observed, especially in just like the last few years, but in the last year especially, as things have powerfully shifted in the world, and I'm just seeing behaviors that I personally feel are not of the highest good, and I just want to share, my perspective on this, okay? So, I think to begin, it's really important to understand that all spiritual teachers are human at the end of the day. They have had their own journeys and experiences, traumas, they have their own egos, and we're all flawed humans. We all make mistakes, and so do spiritual teachers. So I think it's really important to understand that just because there are spiritual teachers out there who have huge followings, they've written books, they've done certain work in the world, they've received certain fame or recognition, Does not mean that they're perfect by any means. Does not mean that they have it all figured out. Does not mean that they could be wrong, in a sense, with things that they're sharing today. Okay? And, I don't like categorizing right or wrong, but it could be that, a spiritual teacher could be spreading certain spiritual truths that are just not necessarily of the highest good, if that makes sense. And to give you some kind of examples on this, and I don't know a whole lot about religion, so I'm not the one that can speak to this, but we've definitely had in history, like for me, being Peruvian, and I come from the descendants of the Incas, and my people were conquered by, the Spanish, who came here and imposed their religious beliefs on my people in the name of God. Was that necessarily like the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, the thing of the highest good? In my opinion, no. That it was horrible what they did, and that they used God to justify their heinous acts, right? So that's what I'm talking about here, is that, these people are out here doing their best to be who they need to be in the moment and do what they feel called to do. And they're following what they feel is right, but just because that's what they're doing doesn't necessarily mean that it's serving everyone's highest good to a certain extent, if that makes sense. And it's a very tricky subject and fine line there, because I honestly am the kind of person where I don't like seeing things as black or white. I like seeing all spectrums to things and finding that middle ground and leaning on the side of the light. And this is who I am and how I try to view things in life. And so I'm not saying that they're inherently like, oh my God, bad or wrong or something. It's just that maybe how they're spreading their spiritual knowledge and wisdom and truth is maybe not leaning into the light as much as it could. And they're actually spreading the opposite of that in a certain way without maybe even realizing it, right? Because again, my intention is not to bash anyone here and make them seem bad or evil or wrong or whatever. That's not my intention. I know that they're literally doing the best that they can. They're human. Like, I see the humanity in them. I see that they're just following their highest excitement or following what they believe is the truth in that moment or whatever it is. And that's where they're at. Because again, we're all flawed humans. We all have our egos. We have certain things that we came here to experience and so on. And so they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in a sense. And they're perfect for where they're at in that moment. But that doesn't mean that what they're doing or how they're sharing their message is like 100% on the side of love and light and goodness for all, if that makes sense. Okay? It's a tricky line, but I'm going to leave it to you to interpret that as you will. So with that said, spiritual teachers can be very flawed. And what they share in that moment, they truly believe, they truly feel, that's their experiment, that's their experience of it, that's their perspective, and they stand behind it 100%. But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily for the highest good of all. I'll give an example later on. So the reason that I'm saying this is because I've observed a lot, especially in the last year, since so many massive shifts have started happening in the world, and I started really just noticing how much spiritual bypassing happens in the spiritual community. And I really started noticing as I watched other spiritual teachers share their thoughts on things connected to like Black Lives Matter, for example, or racism happening in the world, that it lacked a lot of empathy and compassion for people's lived experiences. And it was just very a one-sided, I guess, interpretation of spirituality, and they weren't really connecting with the humanity portion of everything that we were experiencing, right? And I'm going to go more into this in the next video when it comes to the spiritual bypassing and stuff, but basically there were a lot of spiritual teachers out there that were saying things like, well, people chose to come into this world as Black, and so they chose to live this inequality. They have to take personal responsibility for it. Or, we're the creators of our reality. And so people are creating all of this racism in their reality. They don't have to experience it. It's something that they have inside of their beliefs that they have to heal or whatever to move through that and da-da-da-da. And it's just very from this logical place, from this very unempathetic place, it seemed, depending on the person and the energy and how they were communicating it. And it just really blew my mind how they were just speaking these words, and so many of their followers were just agreeing with it and expressing the same kinds of beliefs. And there's nothing inherently wrong because everyone is on their own journey and that's their understanding of things. But as I expressed in many of my own videos that I did last year on spiritual activism and spiritual bypassing and how I overcame that same kind of way of being and thinking for myself through my lived experiences, I realized that's just where they're at in their journey. That's their understanding of spirituality and stuff. And they feel like they're doing something good. They feel like their truth is right. And it is right to a certain extent. I do agree with it to a certain extent, but at the same time, it lacks the heart. It lacks the empathy. It lacks the compassion for one another. And it still felt very one-sided spirituality to me. And so what they're sharing, they're in a sense educating all of their followers around that. And all of these other people are also who agree with this spiritual teacher or leader who's expressing themselves in this manner. And I saw various people, so I'm not singling out anyone. And that's not my nature anyway. But all of these people are then also moving forward in life thinking in this unempathetic, incompassionate way. I don't know if that was the right prefix, but we're going with it. And it just really didn't, for me, support, in a sense, unification and love and coming together, because it was very much to me a separateness of, you just got to get your beliefs together, people. You chose this. You got to step into your power. You got to get it together, and you got to take personal responsibility and fix it. And I am the number one person to be all on board when it comes to taking personal responsibility. I talk about it heavily in my Unlocking Your Potential mini healing program, which you can learn more about in that other video around my healing workshop. It's a different thing, but I talk about the importance of personal responsibility. I get that 100%. But it just seemed to lack love and compassion for people going through this real experience for themselves. There's a time and place to take personal responsibility, and there's a time and place to just be human with one another and have love and compassion for one another and just see each other where we're at and just hold space. And it seemed like some people that are spiritual teachers or leaders were not effectively holding space for people's real lived and experiences and traumas around racism at the time. And it just seemed very insensitive. And that's why I say it wasn't really for the highest good of all, because in order for all of us to really heal, and I say this as a healer as well, we need to hold space for one another when we're in the thick of our emotions and we're processing that stuff. There's a fine line there, like I said, with holding space for people, but making sure we're not keeping them in victimhood and that they need to take personal responsibility and stuff. But it just seemed very insensitive, and I wasn't necessarily judging them. I'm sure, yes, at times I was judging people myself because I'm human and I'm flawed, and we all have these characteristics sometimes, or these tendencies, that are not maybe positive. But then I could see that's just where they're at in their understanding, and I was just the same way as well as them. I was also what are people complaining about? And it was more so around the coronavirus type stuff for me, where I was being insensitive, and I talk about these in those videos on, spiritual activism and stuff. But I was being more of the insensitive one there. And then the universe really had to humble me and teach me to open my heart and not be so stuck in my mind and be so logical about things and analytical and all this other reality is just what you believe and da da da. the universe taught me how to get out of here and come back down into here, into my heart, and to see the humanity in people and to really have compassion and love for their suffering around this coronavirus stuff and like their illness and the losses that they're experiencing and all this other stuff. Like I had to really humble myself. And so when the Black Lives Matter stuff happened and I saw people being insensitive there, I could get it because I was like, oh, they're being just like who I was with the whole coronavirus thing, but they're doing it with the Black Lives stuff, you know, because a lot of these people, to be frank, were white people, you know. That's not to say that there weren't people of color who were, you know, expressing themselves in this way. There definitely were, I saw, but at least some of the big platforms that I saw were from white spiritual leaders being insensitive. And I just had to have love and compassion for them because like that's where they were at, and that's where their level of understanding around all of this was just at. They couldn't help it. And so that's why I wanted to make today's video around, you know, how do you know who the right spiritual teacher is for you? I want you to really understand first and foremost, every spiritual teacher is going through their own spiritual journey and they're a flawed human being and they're going to make mistakes, and it doesn't matter how big their following is, how long they've been in the game and what they've been doing and stuff, like they can still mess up and do things and say things that are maybe not in the highest good of all, but it's where they're at in their understanding, and that's what they're sharing, and it's part of their journey and experience. But it's important for you in that process to use your own inner guidance and discernment. This is something that I teach heavily in my Remembering Who You Are program, is like inner guidance and discernment is so important moving forward. And you have to use your inner guidance and discernment to see whether that spiritual teacher that you follow is really in alignment with you on this deeper level or not. To see if their truth really resonates with you or it doesn't. Instead of blindly believing what they might be saying as truth because they're famous or they're so popular or they've been in the game so long or they know so much or whatever. Don't put people on pedestals. I always do my best in my own videos to remind people, like, don't put me on a pedestal because I mess up all the time. And I am just as human as everyone, right? And I just try to remind people of that from time to time because I know I can't help it if people decide to put me on a pedestal. Like, that's their stuff to work through if they do catch themselves doing that. But I think it's important to be mindful of not putting people on pedestals, and just because they're so popular, famous, or whatever, they're so big, that you blindly accept what they say as truth. Like, sit with whatever they're saying and see if it sits with you. Does it really align with the humanity inside of you? Does this really stand in alignment with the truths and values that you hold in your heart? You know, and if it doesn't, it's okay. Some spiritual teachers are meant to be in your life for just a short period of your experience. They're not necessarily meant to be in your life forever. Maybe some of them are meant to help you get started on the spiritual path. Maybe some of them are meant to help you to expand your awareness or understanding of other things where you've been stuck on, or develop you in ways that previous teachers couldn't, or whatever it is, you know. But just because you have followed someone for a certain time or whatever, or you've been actively following and benefiting from their truth, their teachings, their beliefs, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow them forever, because you're developing on your own journey in a different way from them. And so maybe, even though you're not as big or famous as they are or whatever, you could be more developed in certain ways spiritually than they are, right? So let's say that you're a human being who is following one of such of these teachers who is maybe only seeing things around the topic of racism, for example, from this one place of, it's all in your beliefs, you chose this, take personal responsibility, da da da, and they're not really empathizing, they're not really connecting with these people in a deeper, more human way. But you're following a person like this. But let's say you're more evolved in a sense in your own spirituality, and you're able to see that because of your own process and journey, and you're able to recognize, like, no, but like, people's suffering is legitimate and they need to be heard, and changes need to be made in the world, and I feel called to stand up for that. Then go down your path and do you, instead of trying to continue to follow someone whose truth may just not be in alignment for you anymore. Like, yes, maybe what they're saying also resonates on some level, but if how they're communicating with it or whatever, like, to you just feels off for where you're at in your journey, you got to trust in that. And you got to say, like, hey, you know, even in your mind or whatever, like, just be grateful for that person and how they helped you in your life and the wisdom that they brought and all this other stuff. But you're just going your separate ways because you're evolving in separate ways and you're just going to go in your own path. And there's no doubt going to be a spiritual teacher for you to pick up where that person left off with you and help you to continue, and who's more in alignment with you, so that you can continue your journey and continue to evolve in your own, you know, path and go through your process much more easily, rather than potentially maybe holding on to this person who still maybe has to walk that path a little bit longer of like being a little bit one-sided with their views on what's happening in the world and stuff, and holding on to that, you know? So it's important for you to be mindful of these things as you're going through your spiritual journeys. Not every spiritual teacher is meant to be in your life forever, is meant to work with you forever. You know, that you're meant to follow their word forever. Like, they're just there until they need to be there. And like I was saying earlier with the fact that spiritual teachers are going on their own spiritual journey, it's really important, I think, to be mindful of following teachers and leaders who you know are doing deeper levels of healing work and inner work, and who are choosing to evolve. And they could be wrong in certain stages of their spiritual journey with what they're sharing and the way that they're sharing it. They could be sharing it in ways maybe that are not of the highest of good, that are not radiating love in that moment, because they're flawed humans, and that's okay. That's part of their process. But if they're showing up and trying to do the inner work, and they evolve with time, and they see the error of their ways, and they recognize it, they admit to it, you know, they own it, and they shift the conversation or how they express themselves about things now moving forward, like, I think that's awesome. That shows signs of growth, of maturity, of evolution, and they're just doing their best. And I think that really needs to be considered, you know, and taken into account, because I think we have gotten into this habit of having like this cancel culture, and when someone does something wrong, we automatically want to make them be this villain or this bad guy, and, you know, just write them off and all this other stuff. But it's like, we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And spiritual teachers are constantly making mistakes because they're figuring out their spirituality for themselves. They're going on the spiritual path too, and they're figuring out what that is and aligning with their truth and stuff. And so it can't be helped. But if the person is willing to grow and evolve and mature, rather than hold firm to certain beliefs tightly and just be like, this is the one and only truth and that's it, then I think it's okay to follow those people. Because the reason I say this is because there was one individual where I saw, for me, that this person wasn't necessarily using their platform for the highest good. I felt like this person was using their platform to unconsciously promote more fear and more division. It was unconscious. And I was just like, what is going on here? You know, as I observed this person and the way that they spoke, I just felt like it was very fear-based. Like, I always do my best to transmit my messages in a way that's very empowering, in a way that's non-judgmental, in a way that's full of love. And, you know, I always call on my spirit squad to help me with that, because I'm a flawed human. And if it were just me sometimes just speaking the way I would speak, may not come out the best way. So I always go like, come on, higher self, God, everyone come through, because y'all know, right? And so as I observed this person, you know, using their platform in such ways, I didn't agree with it. I was like, what is going on here? Like, why is this person being irresponsible? Like, do they not see that they're responsible for all these people's lives who literally take their words into so much account because they're a leader, a powerful, well-known leader in this community? And so sometimes people just blindly accept what these spiritual leaders or gurus or whatever are saying. They don't, without a question. And you have to be very mindful when you're a spiritual leader, a teacher. Like, there's that saying, and I think it's from Spider-Man or something. It's like, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's so true. And so I don't know, I just kept feeling repelled every time I happened to encounter one of their videos with the same kind of messaging that just felt very fear-based for me and not promoting people's empowerment. It was just promoting a lot of suspicion and a lot of different things. And they were doing their best to speak their truth. They were doing their best to create awareness. But as they brought that message forward, for me, it felt like it wasn't really creating awareness per se. It was just filling people full of fear and insecurity and all this other stuff that was just very disempowering to them. And so, but I just let it go. I was like, whatever, they're where they're at in their journey. They're doing their best. They're a flawed human, and that's where they're at. But then every so often, I would feel pulled to watch this person's videos. And I always allow my inner guidance to lead me wherever I'm supposed to go. So as I watched this person's videos every so often, I could see that there was a maturation process happening there. Like they were maturing, they were evolving, they were growing, they were learning from the error of their ways and all of this other stuff. And they were speaking differently. They were expressing themselves in a different way. Like their energy had shifted. And I was like, whoa, like, okay, this person is literally doing their best to become better. And I respect that so much. And so this is what I want you all to be mindful of, is like, as spiritual leaders and teachers, we're flawed, we make mistakes, we're going on our own journey, we're figuring out what the truth is, and we're bound to have to make mistakes along the way to figure out what that truth is. And some people might be communicating their truth in a way that's not for the highest good, but you have to use your discernment, your intuition, your inner guidance to see if their truth really resonates with you or not. And even if it doesn't, even if you recognize, oh, you know what, I think that they're really not sharing what they're sharing in the highest possible way, be mindful of not completely writing them off, because they're human. But if you see them evolving and growing and expanding and trying to become better and recognizing, then that's progress. So I just wanted to really share this because I think it's really important for people to be mindful of this and to start thinking about these things. An example that I want to give of this for myself, using myself, I'm going to be writing this post for Instagram, so maybe by now it should be up there on Instagram. You can follow me on social media, and the links of my social media stuff, which will be pinned in the comments of this video. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook as Stef and Tara Coaching, and I have a Facebook community as well if you want to come and join us there. But I always lead by example, and I always share things as I'm learning them to show people I don't have all my things together. I'm trying not to swear, by the way. I'm like, stop the swearing. But yeah, I always share my journey to let people know, like, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm understanding, and so on and so forth. And so recently, I made a mistake in unintentionally, betraying a friend's trust. I wrote a post around the racism stuff, and I mentioned a little bit of our conversation in that post, and that person, was saddened by, my revelation, because I hadn't given them a heads up. First of all, I totally forgot, it slipped my mind. I was more focused on speaking up about racism and things needing to change and all this other stuff, and having more awareness instead of creating excuses around why we don't create more diversity in the world and so on. And this wasn't a jab at them or a dig at them at all, because that's not what I'm about. But I was trying to raise awareness around like how commonplace this kind of behavior and thing is. And anyway, it hurt their feelings. So I'm going to write a post calling myself out, if you want to say it that way, on that, my mistake there. Because I think it's really important for leaders to own up to their mistakes rather than keep it hush-hush in the background and resolve it privately always. Like, you don't have to put all your business out there. You have to, use your discernment to see what you share and what you don't share. But I think for me, it's really important to share it publicly and to have people know, it's okay to make mistakes. You don't have to have it all perfect. And this is what can happen sometimes. You're trying to do the right thing, but while unintentionally hurting other people. And it's important to be mindful of that, and that's going to be a message that I share around that. Another example that I want to give in regards to that and working in the highest good is, if you've been following me for a minute now, at least in the last couple of months, that I've been more forthcoming around my sexuality, my sensuality, I've been dancing more publicly and singing more publicly and that kind of stuff on my social media platforms. And I grew up on R&B music and rap, and Black culture has been so important to me. It's been a big influence in my life. And so I, worked with a lot of Black people growing up in the US and went to certain schools that were predominantly, Black people or people of color and people of a certain socioeconomic background. And so I got used to, in my day-to-day, hearing certain words that are typically used by the Black community. And these words are now normal for me in a sense. And like, I don't think too much about them. So recently with getting into rap again and R&B and all this other stuff, because I'm just, dancing, whatever, being more of my true self and sharing this part of me with the world, these songs are heavily immersed with certain bad words. And so I just sing along to them or whatever, and I just use them because I know I'm not intending to use them in a negative way or to put Black people down in any kind of way or whatever. But recently, it was brought to my attention that, by a friend of mine who basically was like, well, how can you want to defend Black people or people of color and speak up for them when you're using this word, which is the N-word specifically? Now, I don't use the N-word necessarily in my day-to-day. I mean, maybe with a certain friend or two or whatever today, like we might bring it up, and I did sing it, when I was singing along to music and things like that. Prior to this whole incident, like I just would use it maybe in those contexts. And in the past, around certain social groups, like way back when I was a teen or whatever, like, yeah, with close people would use that word. So it wasn't a big deal to me. But this friend pointed this out recently. It's like, how can you defend Black people, people of color, when you're using this N-word? And in that moment, I had written a post like a week or two before, something around like asking people, saying, hey, like, is this a bad thing to you? I'm trying to see everyone's perspective, but this and that, and like I wrote like a whole thing, and I'm asking people genuinely, like, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'm always open to having people point out a perspective or something that I'm missing, because I recognize I don't know everything. In the past, I used to be very arrogant with my Aquariusness, thinking I knew everything and I knew so much and all this other stuff, but I've evolved. So I recognize I don't know everything, but I wrote a whole long thing asking people like what their thoughts were around me using this when I sing to music or whatever it is, in certain social groups and stuff. And nobody really said anything to me. And then this friend pointed this out. And so in my mind, I was like, this person is wrong and this and that, because, human, I have ego. And it just really bothered me though. It really bothered me, and I couldn't understand why. Because I knew I wasn't intending it to use it in a bad way or whatever. And I had asked for people's thoughts and perspectives, and nobody gave me anything else. So I'm just like, like, I don't think anyone else has any problem with it. But I consulted with a friend that I respect and I trusted to give me a balanced perspective, free of judgment, and that could maybe make me see things that I couldn't see. And that's exactly what happened. I consulted with my friend, and my friend helped me to more easily relate it to what I stand for as a leader. I stand, like, they didn't explain it in this way, but they basically said that there are some Black people out there who get hurt by my usage of the N-word, even if I'm not intending for it to be anything bad, even if I'm just singing along to a song or whatever, or I'm just using it in a friendly manner and I don't mean anything by it. There are some people that do get hurt by it. And that was enough for me to really self-reflect and be like, well, Steph, what do you stand for? Do you want people to get hurt? Is that what you're about? Are you so stubborn and wanting to feel so deeply justified in your usage of this word that you don't care if there are people out there getting hurt by you using this term? And I had to really sit with that, because what I stand for is I do my best to lead with love. I do my best to lead for the highest good of all in everything that I do. And it really made me think about that and other things that I had trouble accepting in the past, with understanding it's not worth it to me to use this word anymore, even if it's just in music that I like, and in certain circles or whatever, if it's potentially in some way hurting people out there, because that's not what I'm about, So that was just a really big wake-up call for me personally. I had a whole moment for 48 hours sitting with it and contemplating it and processing it and releasing my ego around it, because it was my ego that really desperately just wanted to be justified around the fact that I'm a good person and I have the right to use this word because I don't mean anything bad by it and I'm a person of color. And why shouldn't I get to use this word, or whatever it was. I grew up with this culture. I grew up with this kind of, vocabulary or whatever. And there's nothing bad about it and all this other stuff. Like, my ego was so deeply attached to that. And I had to shift out of my mind and back down into my heart and really sit with that and just be like, yeah, but even though your mind thinks that you're right around this and that nobody has anything, any right to say anything to you about it, like, what does your heart say? And my heart was just like, you're here to spread love. You're here to help people heal. You're here to do good in the world, to be the best person you can be, the best human you can be. And when you're saying this word, even if you don't mean anything by it, it still hurts some people out there. Maybe you don't know them, you'll never know them. Maybe in your circle, your people are good with it. They have no problem with it, but it still can potentially hurt people out there. And do you want to keep promoting that or not? And so I decided, like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like, it's not worth it to me anymore just to try to be right and, all of this other stuff at the expense of another person's potential suffering, right? So I had like this whole moment with God, and I was crying and everything, and just grateful for my friends who helped me to see things that I'm not able to see for myself initially, and help me to become a better person and leader and human. And for me, that's what true leadership is, sharing these mistakes when appropriate that could benefit other people to hear about and to learn from for themselves, And that's why I wanted to share that with you today, because this is part of my journey, my growth process, my experience of, like, I don't have everything together. I don't know everything. I have my own human ego. I think I'm right and justified sometimes so strongly. But luckily, I do have guides or friends, people that help me to see beyond what I'm seeing and help me to come back to love and come back to unity and come back to compassion and empathy and understanding and all of these things that I feel are part of being a spiritual being, while also bridging that with the humanity inside of us. Because I think that's what it's really about, is both things, not just the spiritual stuff, not just the human stuff, but both things. So that is the message that I wanted to share with you today, and I really hope that it has helped you, it has served you, you got something out of it. Maybe it's made you self-reflect on certain things and who you choose to follow moving forward. And that was just my intention for this video, was just to help you to just continue to align with people who are truly going to be for your highest good as you move forward, and for you to always follow your own truth and your inner guidance as you go along your own journey and come into contact with other spiritual teachers and you learn from them, okay? If you enjoyed this video today, please give this video a thumbs up, a like, as that lets me know that you got something out of this, that you enjoyed it, that you learned something new potentially. And please let me know in the comments below how this message resonated with you, because I would really love to hear your thoughts on whatever I said, or your own journey or experience with being on the spiritual path and learning from other people and so on, and just anything you want to share with me on this topic or any questions you may have, right? Again, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the little bell notification button and change your settings to all, so that you never miss out on a video from me. And I guess that's it for now. I really appreciate you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this message today. I really hope that it was of the highest of service to you. And if you would like to work with me and develop yourself in a greater way spiritually, connect more deeply to who you truly are, connect more deeply to your inner guidance and wisdom, and to more easily, discern your ego from your divine truth and who you really are, and you want to learn how to handle what life brings you much more easily, then I would love to have you come and join me in my Remembering Who You Are program. I launch this once or twice a year, depending on how I'm guided to do it. I'm going to be launching it starting on April 1st. And Remembering Who You Are is a 12-week program that really helps you to do very deep levels of inner work, healing work, to release all of these different things that you need to let go of in order to connect back to who you truly are in your divine truth, right? As I said in this video at some point, it's really important for spiritual leaders to do the inner work, and not everyone does the inner work, to be honest, or maybe not everyone does inner work at the level at which they could do the inner work for whatever reasons. And, to really be the best human beings that we have the potential to be, and to really live with more open hearts and, open minds, and really bridge that gap between our mind and our heart and connect the spiritual with the human. It's really important for us to do our healing work. Otherwise, we're going to sit there with, our egos and feel justified in certain behaviors or beliefs that are maybe not of the highest of good. And we're going to promote more of that separation and division and all this other stuff, and a lack of healing in the world and so on. And so what remembering who you are does is it really helps you to really understand how important your healing is, not just to your own life, not just to the lives of the people around you, your family members, but to the entire world, and how it supports the collective. And it really teaches you how to have these profound levels of self-awareness and how to navigate what life throws your way potentially to help you to grow and evolve and expand, and how to move through it with so much more ease and grace so that you're not knocked down by it and struggling much longer than you have the potential to be. It's interesting because even today I saw someone post something about like going through some kind of experience, and I know we've all seen those memes where it feels like the universe is throwing you the same kind of lesson again and you don't learn, or your spirit guides are like watching you struggling to learn the same lesson again or something like that. And remembering who you are really helps you to recognize those lessons, what you're supposed to be learning, what you're supposed to be doing, so you can actually learn the lessons, move forward, break free from karmic cycles, patterns, karmic relationships, etc., and move yourself along the timeline that's truly for your highest good. So if remembering who you are is something that you're interested in, reach out to me through the social media channels in the comments of this video. You can also go up here to the card section and check out testimonials from my past clients who have taken Remembering Who You Are. And if you sign up before April 1st, you get 2 additional free one-on-one coaching calls with me. So that's an $800 value that you get to have for free by signing up by April 1st, 2021. So that means you'll have like 6 private calls with me in total, because I'm going to hold this 12-week program over the course of 4 months, because it's a powerful journey and process that we go through of just deep healing and transformation. And I need to rest. So that's basically it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye.